Thank you. Senator Cruz.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Recently enacted FAA reauthorization includes a subtitle on establishing an FAA cybersecurity lead, tasked with setting cybersecurity policies and guidance on FAA-regulated aviation operators and avionics. General Reynolds, how have these provisions in the FAA Reauthorization Act helped to protect the aviation industry from a cyber perspective?
Senator, thank you for that question. There are a couple things in the reauthorization in particular I'd like to highlight. One, of course, is the establishment of the Aviation Cybersecurity Rulemaking Committee. We think that's a very, very good next step. The second is that inside that reauthorization was a clear call out that the FAA has sole jurisdiction when it comes to rulemaking on cybersecurity around avionics, propellers, and the ground system support systems. Both of those are very, very helpful for us. It's not just at the fact that they identified them as it is a roles and responsibility issue that goes to harmonization as well.
And how does the federal government do abiding by those same standards? In 2022, Congress enacted the Cyber Incident Reporting for Critical Infrastructure Act, which generally requires critical infrastructure to report substantial cyber incidents to the federal government within 72 hours. A proposed rule is pending that would implement this law. General Reynolds, do you happen to know how long federal agencies have to report a major cyber incident to Congress?
Sir, I believe that's 7 days.
That's a lot longer than 72 hours that airlines and airports have to report an incident to some of those same agencies. What about the types of incidents agencies must report to Congress? If an agency suffers a cyber attack, what is the number of Americans who, if affected, would automatically trigger a notification requirement?
Sir, Senator, if you're talking for the federal side, I believe it's 100,000.
Turning back to the incident reporting requirements for critical infrastructure, depending on the circumstances, could the proposed rule require critical infrastructure operators to report a cyber incident that affects only one person?
Yes, sir, and I think the other part I'd offer too is that of the 10 different regulatory requirements that we have for incident reporting, some again are voluntary, some are mandatory, that the definitions around each are different. The reporting requirements are different, the thresholds are different, timing is different. So to say any one specifically is different, they're all different.
Well, that certainly seems inconsistent and potentially overly broad. I should note that my colleagues across the aisle seem to agree. Several of the Democrat authors of the law have written comment letters criticizing the excessive breadth of the proposed rule. The federal government is also not much better at securing its networks against cyber attacks. Time and again, agencies have been hacked and lost sensitive records on the citizens they're supposed to serve and protect. Recognizing the regulatory state's proclivity for duplicative regulations without regard to economic burden, Congress included a provision in the Cyber Incident Reporting Law to ensure a report to one agency is a report to all agencies. It also required that agencies take steps to harmonize their cyber incident reporting regulations. General Reynolds, how is that harmonization effort going today, and how many cyber incident reporting regimes is the aviation sector subject to?
Sir, as I meant in the written testimony in my opening remarks, it's 10. That's a number that we have to report to. And again, that's an emerging, existing, that's voluntary and mandatory. In terms of the harmonization, I do want to call it at least on one side, the FAA in particular, is using the TSA's requirements and its process. So there's one example where harmonization is in fact happening. We still believe, though, as CISA continues to work through its comments on CERCIA, we believe that is showing a very good option for a single reporting option for us.
Let's focus on the TSA specifically. What are a few examples of recent cybersecurity directives issued by the TSA?
Sir, it's somewhat similar to the timeline you talked about, the pipeline. We are operating off an emergency amendment. In that side of that amendment, there is mandatory reporting. Also in that, there's an assessment and then also the development of implementation plans, as well as an assessment plan. Today, our carriers have had their implementation plans approved. We've had the assessment plans reviewed, and now we're moving on to the compliance framework.
And has the TSA used notices of proposed rulemaking in advance of issuing these directives to ensure that regulated entities can provide their expert notice and comment on those directives?
Sir, they did initially. We did provide comments. I think they felt, and if they had good reason and rationale for the issuance of an emergency amendment, in that process, there isn't the opportunity to provide comments. So we've been working very closely with them. We have a good working relationship with TSA. We work with them to make sure we understand our compliance requirements, and they ask and work with us to make sure they understand how we do threat-based risk-informed programs so that their compliance program actually complements what we're doing today.
The Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, DHS, the same CISA that works with the FBI to pressure social media companies into censoring conservatives, is in charge of implementing this legislation with the National Cyber Director. So we shouldn't be entirely surprised that the Biden-Harris administration has failed to implement the legislation in a measured and reasonable way. What can be done to simplify and harmonize the various regulatory burdens being placed upon aviation?
Sir, I think first I'd just pick incident reporting. I mean, 10 seems like it's too many. So if we can find a single reporting framework that can be adopted by all federal agencies and departments, and that department can then take the information, consolidate it, and analyze it, and get it out to not just the other federal agencies, but also to the private sector, critical infrastructure sectors, we'd all be in a better position. The last thing I think anyone would want to do during a recovery and response issue is having to worry about going through a compliance matrix and figuring out which time, where do I have to report different elements. And I don't think the federal government's response would be any better if you get 10 different agencies receiving information at different times and different periods.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hickenlooper, I think we got you in under the clock. I know